Welcome to the Getting Real with Hilary show, where ordinary heroes tell extraordinary stories during unique and never been heard before conversations with your host, Hilary Arno Burns. Hilary's unique listening and way of asking questions results in conversations that aren't usually talked about, so you can create the life that you really want but are afraid you can't really have. We are demonstrating the greatness in the human spirit and creating a world where we all reclaim our birthright of joy, happiness, purpose, and passion. Now, here's your host, Hilary Arno Burns. Welcome to the Getting Real with Hilary show. And before I introduce our very esteemed guest, we're going to play a little video.
Well, it's often a fact of life that as moms, we tend to put everyone and everything ahead of ourselves, right? But making yourself a priority doesn't mean you're not a good mom. In fact, it can actually make you better. With us this morning is Kathy Sullivan, local author of the book, Moms Eat First, 5 Principles to Prioritize and Create the Change You Crave. Maybe I should just give this to my kids, Kathy, and let them read it so they really fully understand what I'm talking about. But she has just written this. It just came out on Amazon, hot off the press. So, Kathy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I think this is something like us moms have heard, but are we actually going to act on it? Mm-hmm. So kind of talk about the momgry. I like the hangry, the momgry. So it's like, where do we begin?
Well, I think part of what I talk about in the book around feeling momgry is really understanding your feelings. So, what I refer to is, I think, some of the resentment that moms feel. And many times that's, a factor of the
guilt.
Serving everyone else, right?
Yeah, I think maybe we feel guilty if we're not always at home tending to the kids, right?
Okay, now that you've gotten a little taste of Kathy, Kathy Sullivan is an author, mother, consultant, and coach. And she has a very, very special message, especially for women. So stay tuned for this amazing conversation with Kathy Sullivan. Hello.
Hi.
I was almost crying already. Woo. Okay. Wow. Okay, good. All right. So Kathy, as you saw in the video, this is her book, Moms Eat First. And I feel compelled for you to tell them that some of the donations are going to this organization. Do you want to do that now?
Yes. So really the impact, the book is really to help women, particularly moms, on an individual level. But in the work that I do, and really what I want to impact is much broader change. So there is an organization called Moms First, which is not affiliated with my book. It's serendipity. I think that, the names align, if you will, but this organization is a nonprofit, and really they're focused on impacting more structural change and systemic change that really impacts, I think, women from being successful. So there's 3 primary areas that they're focused on within their organization. One is affordable childcare. The second is paid family leave. And then the third is about pay equity for moms. So, their focus is really on helping improve communities in the workplace. So a portion of the proceeds from this book will go to that organization. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. And where is that, in case people, are hearing that and they want to get involved with them, how would they reach out to them? Where are they located?
The organization it's momsfirst.us, I believe, is the website. And it's a small organization, a small but mighty, I will say, from what I understand. I believe they are headquartered out of New York, but I don't want to guarantee that. But I'm pretty sure they're out of New York. I think the team is spread out actually all over, but.
Okay. So if that calls to you before we move on, go to momsfirst.us and you can reach out to them. All right. Back to you, Kathy. So, I've read the book, so I know the story, but I recommend it to all of you. We're going to try not to give you spoilers, but what inspired you? I know you work as a consultant, you work as a coach in organizations, which isn't, necessarily women per se. It might be, so what inspired you to write this book
called Moms Eat First?
Yeah, I would say a few things. So, first is really my own lived experience. I have been a single parent. My daughter is going on 19, and I've been on my own essentially since she was about 2 or 3. I had a son, since then. So, my son is 10. So, I would say my lived experience as a single parent was a lot of that. And the pandemic shifted that into overdrive, Hilary. The second one is really the work that I do. So while my professional work as a consultant isn't just working with women in the workplace, there is certainly some of the projects that I work on are focused on that. And it's not always just about helping organizations to retain and develop women, but many times it's, trying to develop and retain talent in general. And through some of that work and doing discovery, focus groups with employees. Sometimes those are specific to certain communities within an organization, and whether that be, women of color or women who are primary caregivers, those types of communities, and certainly others. I've had the chance to really have some um, individual conversations with other women who have had, their own lived experiences as it relates to being a working mom. And then the third thing I think that really inspired this book is a lot of the research. So some of the studies that have been done that I follow and kind of share in some of the work that I do really support some of the unique challenges that women have. And again, I would say my focus in writing this book is primarily for working moms, but I recognize that a mom's challenge and even some of the experiences we have are universal, right? So this book will apply to really anyone, not just moms. I will add that too.
Okay, and I know your situation was as a single mom, as a single working mom,
Hmm.
but as you just said, I'm just thinking for myself, I don't even think I was either of those at the time when my kids were really small, but I still probably needed to hear your message. Um, but I'm sure it makes it harder as a single working mom.
Yeah, and the research
I'm thinking
supports
about
that,
all the craziness. I
right?
mean, you might not be a single working mom, but you might, the husband might be traveling, the spouse might not be there. I mean, I don't
Yes.
think I had a lot of that help. It was sort of that. Yeah. So I think it would apply to anybody, moms, even not moms,
Yes.
because I, I think it's about putting yourself first. And I don't think I think I don't know. I don't know if we're taught this or it's just part of the culture that well, I think for me it's like you're selfish if you do something for yourself. Others should be first. My mom was never about herself. She was
Hmm.
like she had 5 kids. She was just all about the kids. So
Wow.
I don't know that there were role models
Yeah.
for this,
Oh,
right?
so
I
much
don't
to unpack there. Agreed. I mean, as you saw in the book or read in the book, when I was married, my ex-husband traveled a lot. So, I felt like I was a single parent. And he was a great provider. He's a very good dad. We have a great relationship. Um, at the same time, and this gets to some of the research that I share, is that a lot of the, caregiving responsibilities and responsibilities at home fall on the mom, right? And again, I want to preface that everyone's experience is different. For many, dads out there, or depending on your relationship and your partner, right? Which may look different compared to others, but those responsibilities are very unique to every family. But to your point, what I want to highlight too, and I talk about this in the book a little bit, was kind of our belief systems, right? And what we were, the environments we grew up in and kind of what we were taught, whether that was from our primary caregivers or from society, right? And other influences. And I think that's really what a big takeaway and learning for me has been through this process is to really, what I will say, it was about untethering my role as a mom and what I believed was my role, untethering those beliefs from what I was told they should be, whether that was from my mom or my dad or anyone else. Um, and I think in part that's what kind of facilitates a lot of this comparison, if you will, and feeling that we're not living up to the expectations of others.
And what would be like, do you remember a belief that you were actually told? Like, can you remember hearing one? Yeah, go ahead.
Gosh, there's probably many. The big thing, um, one of the big things I think is really religious beliefs,
Mm,
right? So, whether it's religion or traditions, right? Cultural traditions, it could be a whole host of things. Even, whether you had working parents in the house or a stay at home mom that was there at home when you were, younger. Those are all just, I think, experiences that contribute to what we believe to be the right way to
hmm
raise our own families. And, I grew up in a single parent home while my dad, who thankfully is still with us, my mom passed away in 2014, which was another thing that kind of, inspired me to write this book. But, you know, I was primarily raised by my mom. My dad was in our lives, but as far as who did the responsibilities at home and who did the disciplining, primarily it was my mom. So those experiences certainly contributed to, my role as a parent now and some of the beliefs that I held about what my role is, which I'm still, I would say that continues to evolve
mm,
as my kids evolve and as I evolve.
yeah, yeah. And I could see, like, since my mother was so selfless, I remember, and it's in my memoir, but I was just here for the kids. I didn't expect anything for myself. And then one day, my well, now he's my ex and my son were off playing hockey, but I always had my daughter. And then there was one day when she wanted to go to a friend's house, and I was like, okay, like it was like a change. I was like, oh my God, what, I realized I have no life. And that was like a big moment for me when I said, you know what, I've been here for them. No,
Yeah.
a little victim. No one really cares. No one cares about me. But I said, you know what? I'm going to have a life. And if they need me, they can ask me. And I started doing stuff that I enjoyed. It was really a huge moment.
Yeah.
Even if it was just going to the library and get, like, I love to get a whole bunch of books from the library. And whether I read them or not, it doesn't matter. But like, that was joy. I started following the joy for me.
Yes.
And because I realized, wow, I have really not had a life of my own.
Well, it's like hitting the
And it
pause
was
button,
okay.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And for
It was
some
my
moms, I
choice.
think that,
Yeah.
if that's what some moms want for themselves, that's great. But what I write about in the book, what at least from my experience and from some of the conversations I've had with other women is, again, it comes down to kind of these expectations we hold up in our minds around not just what we expect of ourselves, but also what we think others expect from us and living up to those expectations. And then, with all of that, if we're not tapped into how we're feeling and processing our feelings, that to me is where opportunities for resentment come up, right?
Mhm.
And because we're essentially potentially suppressing our own desires and what we want for ourselves to keep ourselves whole, when our identity is so wrapped up in taking care of those around us. And it's not always just our children, sometimes it's our partners. And sometimes that, I think, carries over into the workplace. Um, so, every individual's different, but these are, I
Yeah.
think, just the questions, right, that I encourage people to explore and answer for themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I'm just looking, like, I'm a manager and I do have people come in as new agents, we're in sales, and it's like, sometimes because sales is hard, a lot of people quit. And, you kind of, there was this joke, and it was, not really funny, but this guy was playing golf, and the wife says to him, "Oh, how was your golf game?" And he says, "Oh, it was terrible." She said, "Why?" He said, "Well, on the first hole, Harry had a massive heart attack and died." He goes, "So it was hit the ball, drag Harry, hit the ball."
Oh
Drag
gosh.
Harry. I know it's a terrible thing, but that's how I feel sometimes with my people. Hit the ball, drag them along, like they're
Hmm.
not, really. You know, I think I probably hold them longer than I need to, um, instead of, like you were saying, letting your kids learn. Now they're not kids, but letting them learn themselves,
Yeah.
or letting them, um, put, it sink or swim.
Yeah.
And
It,
how much should I be empowering them versus letting them go? Yeah, it's like a fine line. I think there's
yeah.
no real line,
But I
right?
appreciate you bringing that up, Hilary, because this is in part what I learned throughout all of my own experience, and certainly in the work that I do, is so many leadership principles apply to parenting. And to your point, leaders in the workplace, when we, have to develop our team and empower them, we have to spend time developing them. We have to set really clear expectations and take time to train them and to coach them and give them feedback. And the example I think I share and think about all the time in the book is, you like, my kids and loading the dishwasher, right? So in my mind, it's like they know how to do it. I tell them to load the dishwasher, but when there's 3 items in there and then the dishwasher is run, that's not very efficient. Right? So, but I have to step back and realize I haven't really trained them how to load the dishwasher properly. So that's on me, right? As a parent.
Mm.
So those, I think similarities across leadership and parenting are kind of what I'm trying to draw in this book. Is that we have to be a leader to our kids, I believe.
And I was going to say, I think it's great that they even ran it.
Good point.
I,
Yes.
I think that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. How much, and then I think, part of, I think it might have been at the end of the book, but you were saying that, you had, I don't know if you're a perfectionist. Are you a perfectionist? You,
Uh yes, and it's
okay.
yes,
Okay.
and I'll come back to that.
All right. So, yeah, like we have certain or how they should behave or how they should act or how they should look, or, there's a lot of things that, like, you were saying before, they come, this is how one should look, this is the status, or this
Hmm.
is, whatever. It could be what schools they go to. It could be whatever. But, like, or let's say, somebody's, let's say the parents are a doctor and they expect their child to be a doctor, or, just anything like
Right.
that. How, can we just let the child be who they are? It
Yes.
and my kids they're wonderful. When I was growing up, it was like, you went to college and you got a job. You know, That's what you did, and you got good grades. Well, growing up, maybe my ex and I had different, standards, but I tried to teach them that, but they didn't really get that. So they have been going along their own path, and they're doing fine, but they didn't go out and get a job. Or my son tried a few, quit them all, and he's really an entrepreneur. He's doing real estate now. He's working with guys very successful. He's doing great, but he's now 28. My
Yeah.
family kept telling him, just get a freaking job, like, what are
Right.
you doing? Get a job. And
Yeah.
he was like, and I was like, it's okay, it's okay. You can follow, I was trying to be cool. And then my daughter's really an artist and she's following her own path. And it's like, okay, they didn't get a job, but that doesn't mean that everyone who comes out and gets a job is happy or fulfilled, or do you know what I mean? It doesn't mean
Yes.
anything. It
Or
just
gets a
means they're following the
degree,
formula.
right? I
Yeah.
think the same
Yeah.
could be said for, people and getting degrees. I think
Right.
for the right reasons, we put pressure on our kids to get an education, and I don't want to dismiss that. I think it is important. Um, but yeah, I think, and it comes back to what we impose on our children around what is expected. And it's a fine line, right? There's a lot of nuance to it. And I think, to your point, Hilary, it's just important for us to ensure that our kids have their own lived experiences and learn from them, right? There's a lot of examples I share in the book, but one that comes to mind as you talk about your own experiences, my daughter. I mean, she thankfully knew kind of the direction she wanted to go going into college. She's, going into PA school. She wants to become a dermatologist. And,
Wow.
she went away for her first year. And I was so, I mean, I don't think any parent, the most heartwarming thing I heard from my daughter a few months into her college experience, when I asked her, "How are you doing?" She said, "I feel I'm more confident, I'm more capable, and I'm learning more about who I am." And education aside, like, that is, I think, the greatest gift to any parent to hear. And it's I think a good testament to, letting go. It's letting go of what you want for your kids, even though
Right.
you think it's the right thing for them, is letting them spread their own wings and trying to fly, you know?
Yeah. And I think, as you're talking, it's like questioning this formula, that we think is the only one that works, like
Yes.
with my family. That was the only one that works. They didn't understand why he wasn't following it. But
Right.
he's doing better than if he had followed it, I think. You know,
Yeah.
and I think, for me, it's, like there's that story in the book about your friend who was just all about achievement, and like, I think that was kind of mine. Like, it was never enough. It was
Yeah.
never enough. I did this. Yes, I published one book. Okay, now I published three, but it's never enough because not enough people bought them, and la la la, and you never stop. And it's like, I never could feel like anything was a success because there was always a but, you know? And at some point, it's like, stop, take a breath. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and so those are all great successes, right? I think it's a matter of how we all define what, like, the why we're doing it, if you will. And I think that, right, the selling or not selling, if you will, is a measure of success. But to me, the success is writing a book, publishing a book, right? And for me anyway, I'm sure it was for you too. Like, the experience itself was a journey, and there was a lot of reward I got from going through that journey. It took a lot longer than I anticipated writing my book. But coming back, to your point earlier about perfectionism, and
Mm,
I think this is something I think a lot of people, particularly women, maybe struggle with. And, I kind of admitted to being a perfectionist, and I've learned a lot about myself. I would say I'm a recovering perfectionist in some regard, but what I've also learned about myself, having my son in particular, who is neurodivergent. So I talk about this in the book. He thinks differently, he processes information differently, he looks at the world differently. And I've realized there's, a genetic component to that. And I too am probably neurodivergent. I haven't been tested for ADD or anything, but I probably have it. And when you think about kind of the superpowers, people who are neurodivergent have, it's often those types of traits, if you will, around problem solving. And I think as I look back at my life, because my mom often called me a perfectionist, um, I am a true problem solver. So I look at situations differently. I think I make connections with people and systems and things differently than maybe others do. And while that might come across as, Kathy being nitpicking or a perfectionist, to me, it's about identifying opportunities. But what I've had
mm,
to learn about myself is that may not be important to my stakeholders, right? So while it might feel important to me to address, I have to recognize there's context in who I'm working with and what their priorities are. And, in some ways, as a parent, the same applies to my kids. While I might want certain things for them, if it's not something they want and it's obviously not required, it doesn't impact their safety and their health, I have to learn to step back and let them figure things out a little bit and empower them, because that's how we develop critical thinking, right?
Hmm.
Is by problem solving. And I don't want to rob them of that, because that's so important as they get out into the workplace.
Mm, that's great. Yeah, I remember the story. When you and your friend were in one room and your sons were playing together,
Xbox,
and
yes.
yes, and you could hear them, and I could feel it, like,
Yes.
but it's like that, it's like that discomfort.
Mhm.
I was talking about something, I have these two, I'm doing this, it's like a metabolic cleanse, and so I have one instructions from the that people, and then I talked to someone else who gave me other instructions, and I picked one, and I kept going, is this right? Like, I kept rehashing it, and then someone said, there's a discomfort, and I was like, okay, what's the discomfort? The discomfort was I like to get things right. I'm not a perfectionist, but I like to do it right, and I couldn't do both. Like, there was I was picking one or the other, or
Yeah.
it was be a mush.
Yeah.
So I had to just choose. Okay, this is what I'm choosing, and let it go. And then I
Yeah.
had peace. And then I had
Yes.
peace. But until then, I was in the discomfort, like when you thought your son might, and I could feel it, as I'm reading the book, like, but then you were like, no, they worked it out. And it was like, whoa, well, that's
Yeah.
such a
Right?
great lesson, to allow them to be the problem solvers. And even if they
Yes.
run into problems, that's like you had said, you grew more when things didn't work out than when they were going well. And I have to remember that because,
Yeah.
for me, I submitted to do like an inquiry for this course, and I was rejected, and I was so mad. And then I got to see, you know what? I really didn't put a lot of effort in. I just kind of threw it together and
Mm.
hit send. And maybe the other people that got accepted had put in more work, had taken it a little bit more seriously. Like, a lot of times I can rely on my natural abilities to get a lot done, but it doesn't always work. So I learned, okay, if I really want to be accepted this time, I need to put a little more effort in. So that was
Mm.
what I learned, and I would never have learned that had I not been rejected. So I
Yes.
think we do, even though it's uncomfortable, we don't like to be disappointed. We don't like, when things don't go our way, but that could be for our best growth, as you said in the
Yeah.
book.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that those situations apply in the workplace too, right? With leaders and dealing with conflict, but and I don't always apply these principles as well as I should, right? So there are certainly times when I step in, but in that particular example, I think my fear was how I was going to be viewed as a parent based on my son's behavior,
Oh, when you're on
right?
the
So
Zoom? Yes.
when you start peeling back, and again, when you have a child who is not neurotypical, meaning they don't do the same things other neurotypical children do, it highlights the sensitivity and sometimes the need and feeling to step in, right? But again, I have to learn about my son and what his needs are, and help him to navigate those situations on his own. So we do that more now and help him to communicate his own needs. And so yeah, I think I believe that's probably a universal experience for most parents, is those moments where you feel like you need to step in, but those are great learning experiences for our kids.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I know sometimes for me when things don't go my way, I want to quit. I want to leave. if we don't give them the opportunity to grow through when things aren't going their way, when they don't get what they want,
Yeah.
then they will quit because
Yeah.
they haven't ever had to go through it,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, we pave the way and they don't have to pave it. So anyway, yeah, I'm just looking at that. I heard someone on the Olympics, I think a couple of people, I don't know where I heard these stories, but they were going to quit. They weren't going to do this one. I forget what event it was. She was going to quit. She wasn't going to do this event, and she ended up winning the gold medal.
Wow.
And she said, I told my coach, I'm not, I don't know if maybe she had been in the relay and she wasn't, and he was like, no. So she did it. And she's like, I won the
Yeah.
gold.
Well,
She
I
won the gold.
suspect, right? I suspect that that plays to kind of the stories we tell ourselves, right? Is in the fear that we feel around situations. And when we don't have that internal dialogue to have our own faith in ourselves and confidence, sometimes we need the external, right, validation and support. And um, we need help from others to help empower us sometimes. um, so that's a good story. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, but also that it fail,
Yeah.
that it's okay when things don't go our way,
Yeah.
you
We miss
know?
all the shots we don't take, right?
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong. We don't have to, I mean, I'm sure I did run away from that, not do things because I was afraid I would fail, only do things I was good at. And that leaves out a whole bunch of new opportunities to learn something new,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I would
Absolutely.
hope, you know, we we encourage our kids to try,
And
I know my
ourselves.
daughter, yeah, yeah, she wanted to be a dancer. And when she was little, there was something, I don't know, she went to grab a water and she had whatever. They said, that's not your water, or something. And she never went back, and it's like, oh, no,
Mhm.
obviously she wasn't meant to, or she would have. But, little things like that can just take us off the path of our dreams. So,
Yes, absolutely.
yeah. So I don't know what we do about that, but
We
anyway,
continue to experiment, I think, and take risks, right? And those risks are
yeah.
sometimes emotional risks. You know, yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
a
also
journey.
to encourage our kids, um, but that it, and I know I think when they're teenagers, they go into having to be cool or not wanting to be embarrassed, right, and stuff like that. That's when it all starts changing, right?
Oh, yeah. And I'm not sure what your experience, but I realize, and I was just talking with my daughter the other day about kind of expectations. And we actually had that discussion around like how things were when I was in college and how I was working three jobs. Um and how things are just different. She's in a very difficult study program. And we wanted her to make sure that she had this first year experience to really get settled and get her feet grounded. And now that she's done that, like now she needs to get a job and contribute to, right, her experience at college. And that again is just another layer of building in that responsibility and
Mhm.
self accountability, right? And ownership of, if this is what you want for yourself and where you want to be, then you've got to contribute to that. So at the same time, I've also realized there's things I could have done differently as a parent to instill some of that in her, right? So that
Mm.
again is my learning. But yeah, I look back at my life as I wouldn't say any regrets, a lot of lessons I've learned. Um, and for me, I think they're only good if you apply what you learn. Otherwise, you're
Right.
repeating, right? Potentially negative patterns. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, this is such a great conversation. All right. We're gonna step away and let our sponsor speak and come
Okay.
back after our commercial. Thank you.
Has social emotional learning become just one more thing on your teachers' plates? Do teachers and students both find it boring and ineffective? Then bring Kikori to your school. Kikori transforms classrooms through experiential SEL activities that help students play, reflect, connect, and grow. Even better, students say it's more fun than recess. Schedule a no-obligation conversation at kikoriapp.com/bringkikori. KIKORI.
Do you ever feel like you can't say what you really want to say? Or that you're stuck or in a holding pattern in your relationships, career, personal life, or finances? Are there things you want in life that you've given up on? Are you resigned that this is as good as it's going to get? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then Hilary Burns, host of the Getting Real with Hilary show, has the solution you need. Hilary is a published author of 3 books and has a program called the Getting Real Process. This process frees you from what is holding you back, allowing you to create a life you love. Don't believe it? It is hard to believe that it could work, isn't it? The proof is that hundreds of Hilary's clients have used the Getting Real process and are now free to create whatever they want in relationships, career, finances, enjoying life, or just loving themselves more. So go to realtalkwithhilary.com and order Hilary's book, Real Talk, and set up a conversation.
And thank you, as always, to our sponsor, kikoriapp.com. If you want to bring experiential social emotional learning to your children, to your teams, to your schools, to your businesses, go to kikoriapp.com and schedule a consultation. And then just to promote my books shamelessly, this is the book I was talking about where I had that experience where I wondered what had happened to my life. I'd gotten married and I said, what had happened to my life? And this is the story, a very courageously written story, I must say. You're not allowed to judge me, but where I talk about how I refound that old Hilary, that old dancing happy Hilary, and brought her back. So if you find yourself in that position, you might enjoy it. It's called The Second Piece of French Toast. If marriage was my dream, why was I numbing myself? Good question. All right. And then we have Your Bullshit is Your Blessing. My mother's horrified by this name, but it's really about the 2 sides of life that I had discovered. On one side, everything was kind of bad. It looked terrible, but then I realized there was another side where everything was fun and good and there was possibility. So I started finding techniques for getting from the sad and sorry side of life to the fun side, and that's called Your Bullshit is Your Blessing. How to stop fixing yourself and start having fun. And then, as the commercial said, this book is Real Talk. The subtitle, How to Say the Things You've Never Said So You Can Have the Things You've Always Wanted. That's what I realized after I wrote the first book, was that someone asked me, why didn't you speak up? And I was like, I didn't even know I wasn't. So this has been a journey as well. You can read this and you can go to Hilary at gettingrealwithhilary.com. Check it out, schedule a time to talk. And I also have a weekly newsletter that I never tell people about, but you can subscribe to that at gettingrealwithhilary.com and you'll get stories, links to everything, and you can get that every week. It's really fun. All right. And now to bring back our wonderful guest, Kathy Sullivan. Hello, welcome
Hi.
back.
Thank you.
Hi. Wow. Well, that was exciting, that first half. I think I could talk forever about all that stuff. So, but I know, we did talk about I think was it moms first? We talked about that and how you're donating a proceed of your profits from your book. Let me hold that one
Yep.
up again. Moms Eat First. And then Kathy, I know you've gotten your work experience from your other work. If you want to talk
Mhm.
about that now, um, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll
thank
let you
you.
talk
So
about it. Yeah. Go ahead.
my business is Talent Principles, which is an organizational development consultancy and coaching practice. So the work I do, I would say I categorize into probably three different areas. One is helping business owners. I work with all organizations, but um, I enjoy working with smaller businesses who are trying to scale, who maybe don't have the right talent in place or need to develop their teams. So I work a lot with business owners and their executive teams, and sometimes that also developing strategy, putting metrics in place for the business, and then helping them cascade those goals and communicate them. So that's kind of one bucket. Another area that I focus on in working with organizations is around developing talent. So I design, develop, and facilitate leadership development programs. And those might be, kind of one off workshops, if you will. But really, where I enjoy spending my time is the longer term programs that are often running 9 to 12 months, because we're often looking at developing change in people. And the best way to do that is to give them the resources, the tools, and the support. So, with that, I do a lot of individual coaching, and that's kind of the third category that I spend my professional time working on.
And how do you normally get your clients? Is it word of mouth or yeah?
The vast majority, yes. I haven't had to do really much business development. All of the work I've done over the last 5 years, so I'm coming up on my 5 year anniversary, has been referrals.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah,
That's really great.
been very
So
fortunate.
so can you give an example of a leadership development? Like what size company would do something like that? Could it be a tiny one or a bigger one?
Absolutely. It varies. I would say the majority of the clients I'm working with are probably under 50 million in revenue. As far as employee size, it's going to vary. Certainly, some of it comes down to investment that they're making in talent, and I think so. My background's in human resources. I spent many years working in talent development, and then I went into consulting about 9 years ago or so. And one thing hasn't changed is the importance of developing your people. What that looks like might be different for every organization. So, the method of delivery for me is often doing in-person workshops, doing coaching, like I said, and sometimes those programs are delivered virtually. But I think the needs around that, my focus again is primarily around developing leadership capabilities. So, focusing on emotional intelligence. I also like to work a lot with cross functional teams. I think organizations, there's some commonalities that organizations experience in trying to get teams to work together. And some just common challenges that people experience. And sometimes what we think is creating conflict between two individuals is sometimes a lack of clarity around roles and responsibilities, or processes aren't clearly defined. There could be a whole host of other things. And that's really what I enjoy about the work I do, is trying to explore what is the real issue that we need to solve for, rather than addressing what's on the surface. And
Mm.
that comes back to kind of what I talked about earlier in the problem solving.
And who usually hires you? The head of the company or like how would
Yeah, I
they
would
how, yeah,
sometimes
go ahead.
on occasion I work closely with the HR, like director of HR, the
Mm.
HR leader, I should say. But the vast majority of my clients are actually leaders within the business. um, and it depends on the need that they have. So sometimes leaders bring me in to work with their team, and I usually work with the leader and the team. It's not just the team, because they are a unit, if you will, and there's dynamics that go into play. But I would say the vast majority are executives that bring me in.
And how do you, when you said like, what's the real issue? Have you ever found that they bring you in for one thing and then you realize that's not really the that's not really
Yes.
the issue here?
Yeah, I mean, so part of that, is the discovery work I'll do up front. And just an easy
Mm,
example is, sometimes people are like, we want training and we need training on this topic. I'll do an intake with them to talk about, what are the observations they're making? What does success look like in this? And through that conversation, I often uncover some other potential challenges. So it doesn't always turn into consulting, which is more of what that gets into is, doing discovery work and providing some consulting services around potential recommendations and solutions. Um, but, I would say more often than not, there are other challenges or issues that could be addressed, right? But at the same time, I have to recognize that um, my client has certain priorities and my job is to help them align with those priorities and to help identify solutions that are going to address those.
mm. Does it ever get sticky like, well, you hired me for this, but I see this is an issue? Or only if it gets in the way of what you're doing, probably, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I mean, certainly there may be situations where I've uncovered other, issues that are worth addressing. But again, my
Mm,
job as a consultant, as a coach, and really a change agent is to ensure that um, I'm addressing my clients' problems and that I'm aligned with them, right? And that we're
mm,
communicating in that relationship because it's about building trust.
mhm.
If I see an issue, it's not going to matter if it's not something they want to or can
Right,
address. So,
right.
I just find, in some cases, my job is to at least give them an outside perspective, right? Because I think part of the value of being a consultant and a coach is you're getting an outside perspective. And many times I think people internally are so what I'll call connected, and sometimes it's emotionally connected to the issues, right? So
Mm,
hearing from someone from the outside can provide, I think, sometimes an unbiased perspective.
right. Okay. Cool. So if people want to find you, they can go to talentprinciples.com, correct?
Yes, yes.
All right. And what else would you like people to know about what you're
Um,
doing?
I would say so. The book you can find on Amazon,
Hmm.
and I can be found on LinkedIn too. My under Kathy Sullivan. Um, I think that's
Okay.
primarily it. We talked about the the portion of the proceeds being donated to Moms First, so I'll just reiterate that. The book itself is intended to really provide tools and some strategies to help women to help create agency for themselves, but the impact I want to have is much broader, and that's again the donation that I want to make to Moms First.
Okay, cool. So we have some time left. One of my notes to ask you was mindfulness amidst chaos. I think mindfulness is easy when you're calm, but I think when there's chaos or panic or something,
Yeah.
it's not as easy to recognize that you've lost it. You're just kind of in the thing, you know? So
Yeah.
what have you learned about that that you could, impart upon us sorrowful people or whatever?
So I'll share what I've learned, right? So in the work that I
Yeah.
do, I mentioned earlier, some of the programming I facilitate is around developing emotional intelligence. So this I all learned through my coaching certification through Case Western Reserve University, which was a fabulous program. And it was what I needed at that time.
Mm,
And it's probably foundational to everything that I do. So, to me, the mindfulness amid chaos is really about one, it's about recognizing that you are amid chaos, right? Knowing
Right.
yourself and really just understanding what you need to do to move through that to get to the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. And that's not mindfulness necessarily defined, but I think the examples that I talk about, in the book as a parent are, in short, what I want for myself and my kids is a strong relationship, and that
Mm.
evolves over time. It changes based on the season of life I'm in and where they are as, young adults. And that ebbs and flows, right? So when I'm frustrated at home because the kids haven't done something right to help me out or whatever the case may be, my natural tendency might be to get upset and to get frustrated and maybe yell at my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I have to have that awareness, right? And be mindful and choose a different approach and response because of what I want for the relationship.
Mm.
And to me, that's, emotional intelligence at its best because
Mm.
that strong relationship impacts everything going forward, right? That builds trust. And really, what I want as my kids get older is to use me as a resource, to talk to me when, they're struggling, rather than worry about me yelling at them or feeling judged or anything of that sort. And again, that's, I think, a leadership quality that I've applied to parenting.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I love what you talk about in the book when you walk into the house and you could get two different react like very very different reactions. Do you want to
yeah.
talk about that for a sec? I think that
Yeah.
was
So, uh,
yeah.
the example is, if I've come home from work after a long day and I'm frustrated and I can walk in the house and be all stressed out, my kids read that on my face and they might think, well, I'm going to leave mom alone, right? She's not in the mood. Um, and that might like impact our whole evening potentially, where if I pull into the driveway or in the garage and I take a moment and take a deep breath, right, and maybe turn on a song that is inspiring or that changes my mood, and then I walk in the door, it just changes. It's my presence is very different, and that can have a more positive impact on my kids and our whole evening. Um, so yeah, and I again see that in the workplace too. As leaders, we have to recognize how we're showing up for others.
Mm. Yeah, I don't think we always realize how our moods affect people
Yeah,
in a big way. Yeah. So thank you.
you're
Um,
welcome.
so in like what would you see, I guess I would say like as your vision for the future? Let's say your book takes off, Mom's First explodes, your business explodes. What impact would you want to have?
I think for me, it's about the conversation. Like what I really enjoy about what you're doing, Hilary, is inviting people to talk about some hard things, some uncomfortable things. And, while I don't get into this a lot in the book, what I experienced is that I think sometimes women moms aren't having the conversations they need um, to create the life they want for themselves. And whether that's talking with a boss, right? We make assumptions around what our boss might say or do, or our partner or our kids for that matter, right? So I talk about some examples of that in the book. So I would say my vision is to create space for those conversations and to help support people, and provide them with the tools, to have those conversations.
Wow, that's awesome. And if that did happen, let's say, that's what happened. There was space for these conversations. How do you see the world?
More loving.
Mm.
more accepting of each other and, other people's differences, better listeners.
Mm.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah. What a planet we would live on, right?
Right?
I can feel it, right? Can't you feel the energy just shifted? Whew. All right. Well, thank you so much, Kathy Sullivan, for your amazing work, for your dedication to women, for putting your, leaving yourself vulnerable by telling your story in the book in order to help other women. That's very inspiring, and I thank you for that.
Thank you for having me, Hilary. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. See you next week, everyone. Join us again. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode. I started getting real with Hilary when I discovered that I was a people-pleasing, pleasant phony and wanted to be more of my real self. We can grow together if you will like the show, subscribe to my channel, and share this episode with your friends and family so that we can have a world that's more real.